Hey guys, Stitches here, and welcome to the event that teased a while ago, and that event is to celebrate Beyblade Day. By the time this comes out, it will officially be March 21st, 2025, and March 21st goes to 321. And if you know anything about Beyblade, 321 let it rip or 321 go shoot is the phrase you use to start a match in Beyblade. So first off, if you don't know what Beyblade is, I guess I have to give a rundown of what exactly Beyblade is. Beyblade is basically a game slash sport, depending on how you look at it. I personally think now it could qualify as a sport due to the high competitive scene. What it involves is the usage of two spinning tops specialized for particular types of patterns, movement, or interactions with other spinning tops. They're two of them are placed in an arena, and you battle it out to see which one stops spinning first, or which one gets knocked out first, or which one breaks apart first. From what I can tell, this is based on a Japanese toy called Bagoma, and I think is even further based on a thing called Bais or Bais. But it's one of those Japanese properties that aims to adapt something old and traditional into something more modern that people are more likely to enjoy. Now, the original Beyblade series, I believe, began in 1999 and ran until 2004. This series I typically refer to as Bakuten Shoot. Some people call it Plastic Gen. I also occasionally call it that. But that was not my first introduction to Beyblade. It was actually the 2009 series Beyblade Metal Fusion, or as I'm going to call it, Metal Fight Beyblade. Metal Fight Beyblade basically had a system where Beyblades consisted of a face bolt, an energy ring, a fusion wheel, which was the metal part, a spin track, and a performance tip, with the spin track and performance tip affecting how the bay would move in the stadium, the fusion wheel being the main contact points of your bay, the energy wheel being some extra plastic contact points that typically existed just to match your face bolt. And of course, there was a face bolt which you needed to tie the actual bay together by screwing it together. Metal Fight Beyblade, I feel like, was like where Beyblade really hit its peak in terms of popularity until more recently. Just because I feel like a lot of people recognize Metal Fight Beyblade, a lot of people recognize the Beyblade Let It Rip part of the intro, and a lot of people also recognize just the actual Beyblades themselves, like Pegasus or Sagittario. Or even El Drago. Now, I believe the original set I had was this set I'm showing on screen right now. This was the Hyper Aquario and Thunder Libra set. These were actually adaptations of the pre-hybrid versions of Aquario and Libra made by that were originally unreleased by Hasbro. The only difference is that these are considered entirely different Beyblades because they actually use the hybrid wheel system. Because of that, Hyper Aquario is actually considered slightly better, I think, than regular Aquario. A fair amount of these bays are, and some of them, I think very few aren't. Now, when it comes to whether I still have these Metal Fight Beyblades, the answer is no. There became a phase in my life where I thought I was like too cool for Beyblade, so I kind of got rid of all my Beyblades eventually. I think around the year of 2013. So, yeah, unfortunately, as far as I know, no remnants of these Metal Fight Beyblades exist around my home or really any of my family's homes. I mean, there's a chance that they do, but it's honestly pretty unlikely. And if they do exist, they're probably in pretty rough shape. After several years of not being into Beyblade, I believe in 2015 I would get back into Beyblade via the Beyblade Burst generation. This was the third generation of Beyblade, where Beyblades were heavily simplified down to three parts: a layer, a disc, and a driver. The layer was your main contact. Your disc acted as weight and a secondary contact, as well as performed some performance changes that I think overall ended up being pretty negligible. With the exception of a few. And lastly, the driver was the tip. That would actually affect how your bay would move on the stadium. Most of them are roughly the same shape, though later on they got more and more creative with it. So I believe I initially got Beyblades on Black Friday of 2015, and I don't even remember if they were on sale, but I did buy them. I got this Avatar Attack set that came with Victory Valkyrie and Kaiser Kirbius. But they were called Valtryek V2 and Kerbeus K2 in Hasbro. In America, which was handled by Hasbro. I remember out of the two, I picked um Valkyrie because I thought my brother because it was the most like Storm Pegasus, which was a bay I don't remember ever actually owning. I think I might have owned Galaxy Pegasus at one point and may have lost it. But yeah, my relationship with Burst kind of was very complicated because I was pretty invested in it all the way up through the Switch Strike era here in the US. And then they started doing things that made me a little irked. Specifically, one of the things they did was they took what I thought was going to be the coolest possible expansion they could make to Beyblade Burst, and they completely ruined it over here by completely changing the gimmicks and ideas of it. Yep, I am not kidding. Over in Japan, they got Beyblade Burst Cho Z, which was basically the return of metal clad layers on Beyblades. This meant that a lot of Beyblades had metal on top, meaning that if you tilted the Beyblade a certain way, metal could be used to do attacks. And my favorite Beyblade from this generation was the Achilles, the one of the first ones released. It was a balance type that had a tip that called extend that let it change height. Now in the US, I waited months and eventually we finally got word about it, which was Beyblade Burst Turbo. And I was stoked about it until I heard rumors that supposedly they were completely removing the metal from the layers. A lot of people initially had thought this because a lot of the Hasbro recolors we were seeing um, leaks for actually would recolor the metal portion. A lot of people thinking cool that we were getting cool metal coat recolors of these bays, but it was later revealed that this was not the case, and in fact, we were getting a completely different thing. It's really unknown why they did this, other than likely they wanted to save money and didn't want to sell the same product. But it ultimately became Hasbro's downfall because they kept doing this every single season with Turbo, with the slingshot gimmicks and Turbo, the hypersphere gimmicks and Rise. Um, I don't even remember what the gimmicks were in Surge, but I remember that the bays were still off heavily. And yeah, things were just not good for the game here. Eventually, I decided to give up trying to be invested in Beyblade because it was a really expensive hobby to do it correctly for a while. Mainly because I would have to import every new product I wanted from Japan, which ended up costing a lot of money, and it was more money than I could afford at the time. So unfortunately, I had to put down Beyblade, and I didn't really try to pick it up again until Dynamite Battle, when I picked up the Dynamite Belial set, and even then, I still didn't really have enough money to be trying to import all these products. So I kind of just gave up on Beyblade Burst. Then, within the past 2 years, they announced a new Beyblade series, Beyblade X, which is the current Beyblade series. Beyblade X is, in my opinion, Beyblade perfected in a lot of ways because it takes what every generation I feel like did right and is trying to do that in some way. So, I'm kind of going to talk about that. So, Beyblade X, I believe, was announced shortly after Beyblade Burst ended, like within 3 months of Burst ending. And because of this, they actually had to put a ton of disclaimers in boxes stating that Beyblade Burst products are not cross compatible with Beyblade X products. Also, really quick, I should mention that Hasbro actually continued to make Beyblade Burst products long after Takara Tomy did. A big reason for this was that Hasbro actually had their own anime series called Beyblade Burst Quad Strike. This used a lot of the Burst Ultimate bays that were released after the anime and manga had ended in Japan, but adapted into Hasbro's new Quad Strike system. Similar to those bays, they're pretty much just Hasbro's equivalent of Dynamite bays, but worse. And they did have a unique gimmick, being that every tip had two different tips you could use. You could use the covered outer tip and a special inner tip, and this actually made it so you could change tips quite easily. And I didn't mind this gimmick as much, but I felt like it would work better as a gimmick for like a whole Beyblade season. So, I don't really know what they were doing. I never had any of the quad strike shit just because it looked bad. Anyway, Beyblade X was announced, and I remember I saw like the first chapter of Beyblade X, and things just kind of didn't grow on me initially. The way people were explaining it to me, it sounded a little weird. Um, they were saying all the Beyblades are named after weapons now, named after acting like they weren't really named after um like creatures anymore, which kind of turned me off a little bit to it because I'm like, why would I want them named after weapons? Really, what they had meant was that we had like Dran's sword and Knight Lance and stuff. And initially, when I was told about Knight Lance, I kind of assumed that there was a customization element where you could like choose which like bit beast you wanted, like which avatar you wanted. This was not the case, and I was told that was wrong. And so I kind of just stayed away from Beyblade X for like 2 years until pretty recently when I got back into Beyblade X in the end of 2024. Beyblade X has quickly included itself in my collection of Beyblades, and I think that Beyblade X bays are pretty cool. They're doing a lot more efforts to try to make people happy, such as Japan is trying to make it so not only are Takara Tomy bays more accessible to the West, Japan's company, Takara Tomy, the people who make the Beyblades, actually are the ones producing all of the Beyblades that even get released over here in America, from my understanding. And instead, Hasbro is now just in charge of distribution rights. This doesn't mean that Hasbro is without its faults, though, in regards to this. Hasbro starter packs don't come with the same launchers that the Takara Tomy ones do. You still have to buy the official tournament winder separate, but the official tournament winder is a thing you can buy separate in Hasbro, which some people actually like because it means you can buy launchers individually, even if they are just like $7. So that is one thing. I suppose you can look at it positively or negatively. It really just depends on how you want to look at it. I think the fact that you can buy launchers is cool, but I think the fact that we get these weird square proto launchers is not super cool. Anyway, Beyblade X so far I think is pretty good. I've watched all the episodes of the anime I can currently that are on Disney Plus. That's and you might be saying why on Disney Plus? It's actually because Disney Plus has more episodes than Netflix. They had about 10 more episodes for some reason. I think likely because of how Netflix divides up the arcs or streaming rights or some reason. So I've pretty much gotten back into Beyblade. I've even started playing the Metal Fight games on the 3DS and DS. And I've also started reading the Metal Fight manga. So who knows? Maybe I'll give my opinions about that, as I've been reading that as sort of a way to re-experience Metal Fight Beyblade without having to rewatch the anime, since reading the manga is actually a lot faster. And I also get to see a lot of Beyblades that weren't in the anime, such as the original pre-hybrid versions of those Beyblades. And last but not least, I've also been finally continuing where I left off with Beyblade, where after I finished the Beyblade Burst Rise season, I have moved on to Beyblade Burst Sparking, watching the subbed anime, since it's kind of hard to find the dubbed version now. So, it's pretty cool to dive back in, see a lot of old characters I really like, especially since Sparking did this thing where it brought back a lot of popular characters. Like, it brought back not just Vault, but also Aiga and Drum. And it also brought back characters like Ranjiro Kiyama, Rantaro Kiyama's younger brother, made Rantaro Kiyama a major character again by making him the trainer or the coach of the main two protagonists. We get two protagonists in that season. Hikaru, the older of the two, he is the older brother of the two, and is the user of the left spinning balance type Bay, King Helios. And Hikaru, the younger brother, who's a little more gung ho and less level headed and intelligent than his older brother, um, he uses the Beyblade Super Hyperion. So, Anyway, so Beyblade X is kind of interesting because of how it kind of brings back the idea of gears, where like it kind of takes the engine gear idea and turns it more into like a normal thing where like if you hit the extreme line, which is this new part of the Beyblade Stadium, which by the way, they finally changed the Beyblade Stadium for the first time since like Metal Fight. And I mean like changed it in like a major way, being that it's no longer this like triangular shape. It's actually now this full on like rectangular shape with all the pockets on one side. Additionally, I think this is the first Beyblade generation where if you get knocked out of the play area, it actually doesn't award you points. In Beyblade Burst, this was always ruled as a ring out, because pockets just led to the outside of the arena. But yeah, so Beyblade X changed a lot of things. It also reintroduced metal from the start. So all of the blades themselves are made of metal, which I think is cool. We have three-part system like in Burst. I thought that was cool because it means the part system is rather simplified. Some people would prefer something more technical, but I think to start, this was a good point, especially because we are going to get more technical. Additionally, the parts kind of serve more of a purpose like they do in Metal Fight, where it's like the bit actually determines how your bay performs in the stadium, and the ratchet, which is the center part, more determines the height and the shape of it. So, Anyways, that's really it for my sort of how I got into Beyblade video, like my history with what would I call this? Let's talk about my history with Beyblade. I'm really hoping that you guys enjoy Beyblade Day because I also have several other videos coming out. I have videos coming out on the hour every hour today. At least that's the plan as I'm recording this, but right now it's looking a little scary to try to do so. I'm having issues with actually getting the videos off of my phone onto my computer for the editing process. Additionally, there will also be two other special videos. One at noon going over my Beyblade X collection, going over parts of my Beyblade collection, and also we have one last video at the end that's a special surprise. But I may have already hinted to it already. I mean, I suppose your hint is that it's Beyblade related, but yeah, I really hope you guys enjoy the Beyblade Day videos, And yeah, that's really all I have to say. Check out the links in the description. There's a link to my Twitch page where I live stream, a link to my Blue Sky social media page, link to my Ko-Fi page where you can get access to content and ideas I have early. You should also like the video, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all that. Also, go check out those videos. I also specifically have a playlist linked for Beyblade Day, so you're going to want to keep an eye on that playlist throughout the day to see videos as they come out. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one then. Bye.